This is Battleground PA, a PennLive podcast discussing the issues that matter to Pennsylvanians and documenting the events in the Keystone State and beyond that could shape how you vote in the 2024 elections.
Well, hello, greetings, everyone. So nice to have our PennLive listeners, viewers, and readers here joining us. This is Joyce Davis. I'm PennLive's outreach and opinion editor, and this is Battleground PA. I am delighted once again to have a very informed guest who's joining me, who's going to kind of discuss these, again, historic events that we are living through. I'm here with former Lieutenant Governor and former acting governor for Pennsylvania, Mr. Mark Singel. Welcome, Mark. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me again.
Well, this is wonderful. I thought this would be a good opportunity. You have such a sense of Pennsylvania history, but also in your columns, you have a very clear sense of U.S. history. And the theme that I want to talk about right now is what historic times we're living through. We have had let's just start there, a second assassination attempt on a presidential candidate. And I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about this and see what's going on, what's happening to our country.
Well, you're right. I've been in and around the political world all of my life, and I've never seen anything like this. And any professor, any historian will tell you the same thing, that these are unprecedented times. And they're driven largely by this unusual candidacy from a presidential candidate who has shown nothing but disdain for the process. And I'm not being political here. I'm just talking about his actual actions with regard to January 6th and some of the other things that have gone on. And the Republican Party has dutifully nominated this man. I was thinking today of all of the candidates, of all of the logical Republican leaders out there, and there are quite a few. They end up with a candidate that is so flawed and then he's so divisive that it's causing a great deal of pain all over the country. And I lay that directly at his feet. I really do. Now, having said that, nobody wishes any candidate any harm. And it's absolutely unacceptable for presidential candidates to come under fire or to risk assassination attempts. There is no room for that kind of violence in our system, period. End of story. And I think that's what all Americans have to say at this point.
Well, that's well said and very strongly said. Thank you for that. And just to kind of echo what you are saying, I have to tell you, I'm in contact with all kinds of people who are writing letters and op-eds, and I am heartened to hear that so many faith groups. I mean, I have a letter here that's sent to me, an announcement from an interfaith group. They call themselves About Faiths United to Save Democracy. And they are calling, just as a local group here, being led by the Lutheran Synod, the Lutheran folks here, and the Pennsylvania Council of Churches. They are imploring their congregants to please not resort to any sort of political violence and not to condone it or sustain it. I'll tell you, I'm heartened because even though we know churches, many of the more responsible ones, like to stay out of politics, they believe in the separation of church and state. The fact is, many are feeling compelled to speak out, and I will tell you, I'm quite surprised because the church and society has just issued a pretty profound statement, and I will call on our viewers to take a look at it, that is actually, as you have done, put the finger on Donald Trump's rhetoric and on the rhetoric coming now from his vice president, telling them they need to stop this because it is simply it's igniting the worst in reactions in their followers. And I think this is across the board. I think everyone should speak out, right, left, in between. I mean, I'm sure you agree with this, but I'm just happy that faith groups now are stepping up to the plate.
I am too, and I think they have a responsibility to do so. It's one thing to talk about separation of church and state, but it's another thing to stand for character and morality and decency And when candidates cross the line, they really do need to be called out for that. And it doesn't take a big leap to look at the controversy surrounding Springfield, Ohio. Can you imagine?
My,
Can you
yeah.
imagine a presidential candidate suggesting that a group of immigrants are, desperate enough and criminal enough that they're stealing people's pets and eating them, for God's sakes? I mean, this whole thing that's coming down on the Haitians in Springfield is racist. It's completely out of line, and it stirs up the very kind of hatred that results in violence. I mean, people, maybe they've tuned the story out already, but tell that to the Haitians in Springfield who can't go to school, who can't go to the community center because they literally fear for them and their children's lives. And it's all a concocted story. It's completely made up. The manager of Springfield said I mean, very clearly, and the mayor and the governor, that these folks were invited
Yeah.
because there was a lack of labor that they needed to fill some of these spots. And the 20,000 Haitians in Springfield are paying taxes, they're earning a salary, they're valuable members of the community. And it is outrageous that Trump and Vance continue to stir up racial hatreds, thinking that that's some kind of a good campaign strategy. It's
You know,
unacceptable.
absolutely unacceptable. And I am really pained to have to also tell you, and I'm sure you already know this, that apparently they're trying to stir up trouble right here in Pennsylvania, a town. I know how to say it in French, Charleroi, but I don't know if that's what it's called in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But they have a lot of Haitian immigrants who've come there as workers, and apparently there's been some horrible things coming out of the Trump campaign attacking those people right here in Pennsylvania.
Well, and this is the ripple effect, because what happens here is that people who are part of the Trump cult, and I'm sorry, but that's what we're talking about here, who are these diehard MAGA folks that wear those red hats and go to these rallies, are sitting in Western Pennsylvania and they hear about Springfield and say, oh, yeah, I saw a guy that didn't look like me walking down the street of Charleroi. I think there's a lot of them in here. So I'm
Mm,
going to call and make my complaint known as well. So they're making the same charges about the Haitian community in Charleroi, which is Western Pennsylvania, and which again is enjoying the fruits of their labor, has welcomed them into their community because it has bolstered their economy. It's a
there you
good
go.
thing for the
There you
community, not
go.
a bad thing. But it doesn't matter, because if you're trafficking in fear and hate, it's real easy to get somebody stirred up on a racial basis and get him to think that there's something terrible going on. There isn't.
And and just to be clear to our dear viewers, listeners, readers, we love Republican voters. There is no issue. We're not attacking people. What we are attacking is and talking about is a behavior here that is really threatening the very foundation of our pluralistic democracy. We cannot exist as a democracy, as a freedom loving people that has welcomed people from all over the world to live in harmony and unity. We can't survive if we keep up this kind of behavior.
Right.
Former someone who's sitting here is acting as a governor and as a former lieutenant governor understands very well the diversity right here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I don't know if it's just my perception or if this is actually true, but at least anecdotally, in the last couple of weeks, I've had a number of Republicans approach me and say, look, I've been a Republican all of my life, and I believe in the conservative principles of less taxes, smaller government. Makes perfect sense, and we've had those kind of discussions our entire history. Sometimes it is right to cut taxes, sometimes
Absolutely.
spending is correct, but Republicans and Democrats can work that out. Anyway, my point to you is that more often than not, these very prominent, notable folks in their communities are telling me, uh, I can't vote for Donald Trump. I may vote down ballot races, and might vote for Republicans at other levels. But America means too much to me. I'm an American first and a Republican second, and that is a very noble and courageous approach to take, and I give them a lot of credit for that.
I do too, except there's one thing. Things are getting so serious now and so blatant, that I do wonder if more Republicans need to, especially the candidates, need to speak out to say they do not condone this kind of attacks that are threatening the very lives of so many good people in our commonwealth and in our country. Maybe it's time to call for people, good Republicans, and there are millions of them, to speak out. Yes, you may have a different policy on taxes. Yes, you may have a different, even on abortion, but you must have some level of decency about what you're going to support.
Yeah, and I think it's happening. Um, I noticed that there were 20 former members of Ronald Reagan's cabinet who came out and
Yeah.
endorsed Kamala Harris. Well, there's no living Republican president supporting Donald Trump. There's nobody from his own cabinet who is supporting them. But your point is well taken. They have to do more than that. You need to step up and show that it's appropriate and it's okay to say, I'm going to vote this one time for the Democratic candidate because the alternative is unthinkable. And I even think it's perfectly fine to say, look, we're going to vote for Kamala, and then we're going to get our political ducks in order, and we'll take her out in 4 years. Well, that's the political process. If that's the plan, go ahead and give that a shot. But I think this one election cycle demands, just that as you say, that good Americans vote as Americans and not as Democrats or Republicans.
Because Mark, I'll tell you the other thing that really concerns a lot of people is you're undermining the very foundation of your country. You're telling people there's you have no trust in the electoral system. You should have no trust in the FBI. We need to get rid of the Department of Education. We can't have anything like health and human. I mean, it's attacking everything that we need to have confidence in as a people.
Yeah, if folks are not aware of this, the Project 2025 document is very real, and it is the blueprint that Donald Trump intends to implement. After weeks of denying they even knew about it, he as much as endorsed it yesterday. So he's very much in tune with the people who have formulated that document. In addition to sowing seeds of distrust, it actually calls for completely revamping the Department of Justice so that you're taking out professional prosecutors who are nonpartisan, by the way. They don't get their jobs because of who the president is or what their party is. They get it based on their legal skills and their ability to prosecute a case. Well, that's going to be by the wayside because what he's calling for is replacing all of them with his cronies so that he, as president of the United States, can control which cases are prosecuted, which ones aren't, which enemies are pursued, and who they let go and give a free pass to. This is very dangerous. That is not democracy. That is not the way the founders built this country. That is like a really very strange authoritarian way of meting out justice. I'll do it myself, is what he's saying. And you're right. The Department of Justice or the Department of Education is planned to be eliminated, and a host of other very scary things. The reproductive freedoms, everybody's, hearing so much about this. Make no mistake about it. Project 2025 not only endorses a federal ban on abortion without consideration of rape or incest, but it also wants to monitor pregnancies. And then what next? jail people because they had the nerve to get pregnant and nerve to find some medical attention. This is horrendous. And I, you know, this is just a few steps away from what happens in the Taliban, for God's sakes. You know, and that's not, it's
Absolutely.
not acceptable. So you're right that people should be very, very much concerned about that direction that is uh, kind of being kept under the wraps, but is very much a part of what the game plan is going forward. And then, you know, just the utterances, uh, you'll notice that there's a full court press on at every one of his rallies where he questions the validity in advance of the
Mm,
election and
yes.
says, well, if I lose, clearly it's going to be rigged. So he's setting the tone and setting in motion what will be a slow burn revolution if he loses for no reason. There is absolutely no proof that there is any irregularity. And in fact, all of the states have put in extra measures to assure fair and secure elections. And there never was any real level of election fraud in the first place. But just by saying it, right? And just by filing these lawsuits in Georgia and other states, he is raising the temperature and suggesting that there's something wrong. And sometimes that's all it needs to foment a revolution of sorts. And it's very dangerous and it should not be allowed. He should just knock that stuff off.
And that's why it's so laudable that at least in our area, the Lutheran Church has stepped up to organize and to bring together all these different churches, you know, and bringing in the Reverend Dr. Larry Pickens with the Pennsylvania Council of Churches has rallied to say, listen, if you are people of faith, you do not spread these lies about Haitians. They are not eating anyone's pets. You do not spread this vicious hatred out there at any race group of people. You treat people with respect. That message is out there now. And I'm just so glad that they're taking up this cause and they're not simply sitting back and trying to play neutral. This is not the time, unfortunately, to be neutral. Um,
Right,
so
right.
so I'm just pleased to see that that's going on. I will say, I don't know if anyone's seen this, but Evie De Jesus is doing some really cutting edge reporting. She has gone to speak with some of the apple growers in Pennsylvania, and they have told us we need migrant labor. We would absolutely collapse if people did not come in from Latin America and other places and help sustain our economy. This is foolishness not to realize the valuable role immigrants are playing.
Well, that's right. I actually saw the piece you're talking about, and it was really well done and absolutely makes perfect sense to me. Even in Adams County, Pennsylvania, they understand the value of people that they work alongside of in the agricultural field. And it kind of strikes a nerve with me, all of this talk, because I am third generation away from a couple that immigrated to the United States and came by way of Ellis Island looking for a better life, didn't speak a word of English, stopped off in Johnstown and got the worst jobs in the coal mines and the steel mills so that his family could do a little bit better. And every one of us has that story. If you think about it, the only real Native Americans are the indigenous people who are here when we got here. So
Yes.
all of us are immigrants, if you want to look at it that way. And I just don't get how we have become so, um, so anti-immigrant because it's the fabric of this country. The diversity really is what has made the country great. And to turn our backs on it and to stir up racial feelings about it, nationalistic feelings, is very dangerous.
Well, it's not helping. It won't help the country. It won't help anyone. But I will tell you the other thing that I think we really need to remind people that these are such historic times. These are such pivotal times. If you're not registered to vote, and if you are able to be registered to vote and you're not, I will just say that's a crime. That should be a crime.
Yeah,
mean, really.
Yeah,
And not only that, it does look like the Supreme Court has once again ruled in favor of mail-in voting. And we should have confidence in people being able to sit at their kitchen table and fill out their ballot and mail it in.
I will say this though, make sure you do it right, because there
Yes.
was some controversy over the actual way that you fill out an absentee ballot. You put it in another envelope and you
Yeah.
have to sign that envelope and date it.
And dated.
Now, the courts originally ruled, the Commonwealth courts ruled that that was unnecessary. Who cares what the date says on the outside of the envelope, because it's postmarked when it gets to the county election bureau anyway. And how does that affect what the vote is on the inside anyway? Which was what their thinking was. So the formality uh, took second place to the right of people to vote. That was overturned. The Supreme Court said, no, 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 like it or not, the legislature put in place a law that says you have to do it a certain way. And that certain way means sign and date. So if
Mm,
anybody's listening to this and you
yes,
send that ballot back, make sure that envelope is signed and dated, or somebody's going to try to reject it on a flimsy basis.
you can
And on the other hand, I noticed that they've eliminated most of the third party candidates who failed to file their nominating papers in time. So I think there are just two, a Green Party and a Libertarian, or something on the ballot. But it's very clear that this is a binary choice, that you can choose between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And I just continue to believe that Kamala Harris has been steady. She has been professional and gracious. She has not stoked any fears of divisiveness, and has put forth an agenda that really speaks to the future. So it's either moving forward or going backward, in my view.
I
And
oh,
that's
that does make.
simplistic.
Yeah, but
Uh,
I will say this: one of the good things that is seems to be happening and picking up steam, at least I think in Dauphin County, I'm not sure about in others, is that this move to catch the errors and allow people to correct errors on their ballot, that's passed. So if the counties
that's
can
right.
institute that kind of thing, then people can have confidence that if there's anything wrong with my ballot, as should be, then let me fix it. Let me get my vote in.
Very good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because counties absolutely have the right to do that, and they have the responsibility. Now, sometimes counties get overwhelmed at the end of a
Yeah.
campaign season, and they stack up all the mail-in ballots and stuff, and they don't go through them and make those observations. But they have a right to do that, and they should. And I'll go a step further. If you vote by absentee ballot or mail-in ballot, you have every right to call and ask, did you receive my ballot? And
Yes.
is everything okay? Is it signed to your liking? And if not, can I come to the courthouse and fix it?
Mm.
So the voter can initiate that request as well. I'll tell you what I have gotten in the habit of doing. I actually go to the county and ask for the vote, the absentee or the mail-in vote. So about 10 days before the election, or whatever the right time frame is, I'll look the head of the elections bureau in the eye, say, give me my ballot. I'm going to fill it out right here, and I'm going to hand it back to you so that I know I voted.
Interesting.
And not only that, you beat the crowds and you know that your vote is already in. So I recommend that if people really want to be a good citizen.
Absolutely. Well, I will tell you, ever since COVID hit and we were able to vote by mail, I have just dutifully voted by mail. I make sure someone watches I'm doing this correctly to make sure, and then we put it in the mail. But what is so wonderful and remarkable, I have never failed to get the email saying my ballot has been received and
Oh,
has
there you go.
been recorded. So that is another assurance. And I look for that email and it does come in and tells me everything's okay. You voted. So yeah.
The system is secure. And in particular, I want to give a shout out to Al Schmidt, who is our Secretary of State. And he really has focused on elections and is a national expert on it. And he was a Republican in Philadelphia, and he stood up to those who wanted to deny the election and said, no, this was done fairly and squarely. And he's just a good guy and is meticulous about making sure that this is a free and fair election.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up because one of the his Al Schmidt's key messages is why we have to tone down the rhetoric. Our poll workers, our election officials, they've been receiving just unfortunate harassment and even threats. And I heard him speak at the press club, Pennsylvania Press Club, a few months back, and it was quite moving to hear him talk about what he personally has had to go through along with his family. So folks, I mean, these are really good people who are trying to do the right thing. And they should not be subjected to any kind of intimidation. This is not what America is about. And this is not the kind of country we want to leave our children. We want to leave this country better than when we stepped in, when we were born into it.
So,
So,
so the conversation has gone full circle. It comes back to this. These are unprecedented times, and these are unusual efforts to undermine our democracy. And we'll get past it. I have an abiding faith that the voters are going to get this right. We've got 49 more days of listening to all the crazy TV ads and sorting out fact from fiction and rising above horrible claims that are just nonsensical. But if we just, keep focused and we do our best as citizens to separate truth from fiction, and decent, messages from craziness, I
yes.
think we're going to be okay. I think we're going to be all right.
Well, I am so glad to hear you say that because I know you, for one, are following things very, very closely. And again, you have that historic context as you look at everything that's happening. So I want to thank you once again for taking time. And it was on short notice to come and join me for this conversation because, we really do, folks, need to listen to wiser heads now, to people who really have that wisdom, that experience, and that understanding that can guide us during these difficult times. So I again thank you, former Lieutenant Governor Mark Singel, and we will be having you back to share your perspectives very soon. And watch out for his columns. They're coming every week in Penn Live. So once
I
again,
enjoy
thank
that.
you. And thanks to everybody. Have a great weekend. Get out and register to vote if you haven't done so. Bye bye, everybody.